Hello my beautiful friends, awesome to be with you today, acknowledging this, that there's nothing new under the sun, but every sunrise is beautiful. So, angry spouse, angry mouse. Yes, strange title indeed, but when a mouse gets scared, it gets angry, just like we all do. So we're going to take a deep, dark dive into the underbelly of the common argument, where it starts out with some superficial, almost silly thing and erupts into this huge problem. And we're going to look at that, analyze it a little bit, and then see if we can come up with a few solutions that may actually help. So let's see what we can figure out together. Here we go. Part one, the story. There's always a story, there's always an event, something that happens, and then there's a trigger. So we're going to go through the story, and unfortunately it may be a little bit stereotypical, but it's an easy story to dissect and then maybe look at some answers and how this goes. So, to the story. The lovely and gracious and beautiful wife gets home from work only to find her husband planted on the couch looking at YouTube videos. Which that would be perfectly fine, but when she also walks in, she realizes that the dishes are not done and there's a mess everywhere and there's food on the counter. So, she does what any normal healthy person would do. She kindly asks, "What's wrong with you?" So we have this dilemma, all right? So the husband's there relaxing, the dishes are messy. She was willing to come home and cook dinner after a hard day at work, but there's not even a place for her to do that. What happens next? The conflict. So how does the conflict go? We all know how that goes. Words like, "You never," or "Why don't you?" or "What's the matter with you?" type thing. So when she says, "You never," he says, "Yes, I do." And that's a very masterful response. That usually defuses the situation, right? Not really, all right? So now we have the story, the conflict, and then what happens next. Now we have what I call the escalation. It goes from a simple, the dishes need to be done, to a conflict in which she's feeling uncared for, unlistened to, and he's feeling a little bit trapped, a little bit ambushed, and the conflict ensues, and it can turn into a really bad situation where both people dig in their heels, and it can become quite awful. I love Tom Bilyeu, and he tells the story of he and his wife's greatest argument they ever had, great in the negative sense, in which they argued over a cup of tea. And it was a knockdown, drag-out fight that almost ended a nice vacation and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to watch that video on their relationship channel, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. So we're going to take a look at the story and the possible subplots that are underneath this. Now, humans are immensely complicated, and male and female, like I've said and will say forever and ever, are more alike than we are different. But this is a pretty common argument or scenario. And so I think it's a good one to dissect a little bit and then look at some possible solutions that I've gotten from people much smarter than myself and have been able to apply them to a good degree in my life. So without further ado, here we go. So the subplot exposed. So comment down below. Please comment down below. Like, subscribe, and follow. Please, it helps a lot and get this thing going. So what do you think could possibly be going on in Sally's mind? I know, I tried to come up with a better name, but nothing worked. Anyway, so what's in Sally's mind right now? She comes home, the dishes are dirty, he's on YouTube just fooling around, and she's upset. So now if he were to hop up, Joe, were to hop up, run to the sink, clean the dishes, and apologize, it would probably be diffused, depending. But probably, right? But what happens most of the time is Joe will become defensive, right? Joe will say something like, "It's no big deal," or "I'll get it later," or "I've been really busy today. I had a nap earlier and I haven't really woken up yet." Well, that wouldn't be good. Anyway, so you see the dilemma starting. What started out as frustration over dirty dishes is now becoming a bigger issue. Can you comment below again and say, what do you think this issue is? Make sure you make these comments, they're very helpful. So I think that one of the main ones that comes up is, if you cared about me, you would keep the dishes clean. It's an outward sign of your love for me, and it's not much, right? To do the dishes is pretty reasonable, right? For Joe, it's not that big a deal, you know? The dish is not the dishes. I'll get them later and we'll take care of it, and maybe if I don't take care of it, she'll take care of it. Well, anyway, we won't talk about that either. So, but in his mind, there's an indictment. You didn't do the dishes. Instead of saying, well, I should have done the dishes, or can we make some sort of negotiation, he's more like, I do all kinds of things. I clean the bathroom, I work too, I make money too, I fix the car. So there becomes this justification. There's this conflict that's erupting, and it can get worse and worse and worse, and the lava starts flowing, and the air gets cloudy, and then who knows what's happening next, right? Let's take a look at the dilemma. So we're going to take a super brief look at the dilemma here, and this is just one scenario, one way to look at it, and it'll all make sense in the last bit why I'm just going to use this and take all the heat that I get for using this example or this one explanation. So again, no expert here, and there are plenty of good books and videos on this, but in childhood, boys and girls tend to be different and react different to different situations. And again, I think we're more alike than we are different, but there are some consistent things that tend to appear in childhood, and they don't indicate anything other than what they are. Girls tend to be more conscientious and more nurturing than boys do. And it's pretty, anyone that's had children probably sees this. Because they're more nurturing and caring, it can actually lead to a little bit of an interesting situation where they get this positive feedback. Every time they're nurturing, every time they're caring, every time they're conscientious, they get positive feedback, which encourages them to be more of these things. They go, oh, I found the path to acceptance and love, and that's by doing and performing in a way that pleases those around me. And in return, I get love and affection and attention, and this all works great, right? And it does. It's a great thing. Where this can become a problem is when you look at the development of boys. Now, very broad brush here, ridiculously broad brush. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that Joe is a rambunctious explorer child who's very active and does, whatever he sees, he goes for. And most mothers love their daughters and they love their sons, but they tend to cut the boys a little more slack, at least in my experience, some mothers. And the reason for this is interesting. The expectations are lower because boys are a little more distractible. They're a little more not conscientious. They're a little more me, my, I focused. So the expectation for the parent can often be lowered. And when you lower this expectation, the child realizes it's going to get attention whether it does good or bad, or not as much. Even if the boy does wrong, the parent may say, well, at least he did this, and at least he's not getting into trouble. And the positive feedback in this case is, I'm okay if I fly below the radar, or I'm okay no matter what I do as long as I smile and say, oh, I'm sorry, or just be cute, and things will just dissipate and go away. Well, you can see the problem that develops, right? In a relationship, as adults, when somebody comes at it where they're more performance-based and the other person is more just 'cause, you have this sort of intensity and then you have this complacency, and these two things can be very difficult to reconcile. And yeah, it's just going to be hard. And again, men and women are more alike than they are different, but this is a pretty common scenario. So this leads to what I call the trigger. So let's take a look at that. So you have the trigger, which are the dishes, and then so she confronts him about the dishes, and instead of responding in a careful and necessarily loving way, he gets defensive. So this validates her feeling that, well, if he really cared for me, he would do the dishes. So she's feeling unloved because of his conduct, and he's feeling nagged and feel like she's trying to control him and make him do something that he would probably do eventually anyway. So she's nagging in his eyes, and she feels unloved. So it can go a million different ways, but in this scenario, we're just going to say that he just kind of ignores her. It's like, well, it's no big deal. I'll take care of it later. Just don't sweat it, right? And so she goes away feeling unloved. The biggest problem comes in is if this scenario repeats itself over and over again, you may forget one or two of these, but if this happens over and over and over again, eventually he's going to become kind of like complacent. It's like, oh, this is another one of the same thing. I'm being nagged again, blah, blah, blah. And she's going to get to where she's not going to care what his reaction is because she feels like he doesn't love her and he doesn't prove it because he doesn't do the simple things that it takes to show love. I mean, if you're not faithful in small things, why would you be faithful in big things, right? This leads us to the next thing, and I call it, now what? Here we go. Now what? Now what is, I'm going to share an expression with you that I think is very helpful and very useful. I have some people that disagree with me on this one, but I think it's at least worthy enough to listen to and to think about a little bit deeper. Take a little bit of time to meditate on this one, right? And it's the concept that you must want what's in the best interest of your mate, of the other person, whether it's good for you or not. You must want what's in their best interest at all times and be, at least to some degree, a servant of that interest. Support it is what I mean, one way or another. It's very important. The second half of this thought is that the learner, like we talked about in my first video, is about learning and growing and reaching skills and new skills and becoming better and better and better and better. So if you're doing what's in the best interest of the other person, you're going to learn what makes them happy and what makes it helpful. And how your relationship can grow together can come from this. But then there's always this question that follows up, well, what about me, myself, and I? What about my time? What about my things? And she's not supporting me or he's not supporting me. Well, here's what I think is one way to look at this, and an answer to that I think is extremely helpful. Now, this did not come from me, and I really don't know exactly where it came from, but I have a very good friend that's helped me over the years, and she presented this to me in this such a way, that when you have a relationship, a marriage or a close relationship, she broke it down into 3 sections. You have, in this case, his life, her life, and their life together. So what we're talking about mainly right now is their lives together, where they intersect. You have to have individuality and you have to be able to do and express yourself in your life, but you have specific time together. And I'm going to make a few suggestions on here as to what we can do or what are some things you can do to make this better. So when it comes to their lives together, the song that comes to my mind often, it's an interesting song and you may or may not like it, but it's Her Body's a Wonderland. But it's about exploration and about finding out what the other person really likes and enjoying it to the fullest. In the same way, we need to look at our partner in every aspect of their life and try to decide what exactly turns them on, what makes them happy, what turns every aspect of their life into a wonderland, and how can we grow together and make this good. So the only way you can do this is to spend time together talking about these things. You must find out what the goals are for the other person. You must find out what their loves and desires are and what hurts them, what helps them. And this takes time and time together. Now, if your relationship is really rocky, you're going to need people involved helping you do this. People that are brutally honest and can help you and lead you and to hold you accountable in the conversation so it doesn't become toxic. We're going to find out what turns them on in all areas of life and try to make that time together as fun and as explorative, if you will, as we can. So, I mean, the best way that I know to do this is to create rituals. So some of these rituals that I think are smart to create could be walking, could be gardening, could be skydiving for all I know. And I mean, to be specific, even sex dates, set aside time to be intimate together is extremely helpful. But if you want it to really go well, you want to have communication before these things or during these things to make sure that the other person is really feeling attached, connected, and loved. For Mary, in this case, connection is vitally important. And for Joe, it's more about accolades, feeling appreciated. Frankly, all men want to be heroes. And so if you can make your guy feel like a hero, you've gone a long way in making the relationship solid. Your spouse, Mary in this case, wants also acknowledgement, but she needs connection and time and to be listened to, acknowledged, seen. So don't forget, the real suggestion here is his life, her life, their lives together. to make these special and to learn to grow together in every area of your life. Well, I hope this is helpful to you. Please like it, please subscribe, and please follow! Love you guys.